Joining us now is Gershon Baskin, who is the Middle East Director, International Communities Organization, and a former hostage negotiator. Dr. Baskin is credited as being responsible for the secret back channel between Israel and Hamas that successfully negotiated the release of Israeli abducted soldier Gilad Shalit. Dr. Baskin is joining us from Jerusalem. Doctor, first of all, thank you very much for making time for us, and welcome to WION The World as one.
Thank you.
Let me take you back to that 2006 incident with Gilad. What would you say is different now from then when it comes to negotiating with a militant group like Hamas? And what is Israel doing wrong?
There's almost nothing that's similar. Then we were talking about one abducted soldier who was seen as a very valuable asset for Hamas. They set their price that they wanted for his release 6 months after he was abducted. It took 5 years before the Israeli government was willing to make the deal. In the end, that was the deal was made. It was actually 1,027 Palestinian prisoners, including more than 300 who had murdered Israelis who were released in that deal, including Yahya Sinwar, the current leader of Hamas in Gaza. Today, Hamas is holding 136 Israeli hostages. We believe that only about 95 of them are alive still. They include women and children and elderly people, sick and wounded. They are expendable from the point of view of Hamas. They are mainly interested in holding the soldiers, who are numbered around 50 or 60 or 70, in order to release all Palestinian prisoners in Israel. Israel has arrested many, many prisoners since the beginning of this war, and the war is continuing. It's a very strange negotiation when the two sides of the negotiation are dedicated to killing each other, which makes communication very, very difficult. There's a war going on the ground in Gaza, where the Hamas leadership in Gaza is underground in tunnels and bunkers, and they have representatives outside in a country which has no diplomatic relations with Israel, yet negotiates on behalf of Israel and Hamas, together with the Egyptians. I'm talking about the Qataris. So it's all very convoluted and very difficult and very complex, and the demands of Hamas are very, very high that Israel at this point is not willing to accept.
Doctor, the Israeli government continues to insist that their military operation in Gaza will continue unabated, even despite mediators from Qatar and even Egypt insisting that a temporary pause is in the offing. But in real sense, can Israel bring back the hostages without any negotiations?
No, the hostages will only come back alive, all of them, with a negotiated agreement. Israel did issue for the first time an initiative which included a 2 months pause in fighting in exchange for all the hostages and a large release of Palestinian prisoners. Hamas rejected that offer about an hour ago because Hamas's demand is not a pause, but an end to the war and an Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. So Israel is not ready to do that now. But I think what's important to note, and what I keep telling my Israeli counterparts and colleagues, is that the war can wait. The hostages cannot. The hostages are getting killed every day, either from Israeli bombing or from Hamas executions. They cannot wait another day. They have to be brought home. It's Israel's moral responsibility to do that. The continuation of the war can happen once the hostages are home. I'm sure that Hamas will provide the pretext for Israel renewing the war, or even rearresting any of the prisoners that it releases who are deemed by Israel to be dangerous to Israel's security. The hostages cannot wait.
Dr. Baskin, how much more blood needs to be spilled before the Israel-Hamas war even ends?
That's a question that I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, and it's horrible what's happening, all the killing on all sides, the massacre and atrocities that Hamas committed in Israel on October 7th, and the massive civilian deaths and destruction have taken place in Gaza since October 7th. 30,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. 2 million people have now been forced out of their homes and are living in tents. The Palestinians are experiencing the Nakba, the tragedy of 1948, all over again. And the Israelis went through the worst trauma that they've experienced since the Holocaust. This is really a horrible war. In the end, there is going to have to be an Israeli-Palestinian agreement which recognizes the right of both people to live on this land In Indian terms, this is a small conflict. There are 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinian Arabs living between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. And there needs to be two states here where each can have dignity and security and peace.
Dr. Baskin, finally, U.S. intelligence says Israel has only killed 20 to 30% of Hamas terrorists. So with mounting civilian, death toll, how long can Bibi stretch this war? And international voices against Israel's actions are rising. And also, why is peace not a word on the lips of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, a couple of things. One is I take intelligence reports with a very large grain of salt. Most intelligence experts are really good at predicting what happened yesterday. They know very little, actually, what's going on the ground, and we don't know how many Hamas fighters have been killed. Secondly, Netanyahu is seeking to prolong this war as long as possible because his political future is dependent upon it not ending. The moment this war ends, he will be brought to accept responsibility, the failures of Israel on October 7th and everything that led to October 7th. The people of Israel will demand a reckoning with Netanyahu, and he will pay the political price. There will be new elections, and he will not be elected. So he wants to stay in power, and he wants to keep the war going. Eventually, the Israelis and the Palestinians have to understand that peace is a requirement for the security not only of their own people, but for the world. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, used to say, the Israelis and the Palestinians have to want it more than us. That's no longer the case. This war is spilling over to the region and to the world. There are proxies of Iran working. The Chinese and the Russians and the Americans and the British are involved. The shipping ways of the Red Sea are in danger. The war might expand in a much broader way to Lebanon and to other places. The international community has to weigh in heavy now, and it has to push Israelis and Palestinians to mutually recognize each other's right to live side by side in peace. The countries that have not yet recognized the state of Palestine must do it, led by the United States. Palestine needs to be a reality to the Palestinian people in order to replace the ideology of Hamas. Palestinians have to know that they can live for Palestine and they don't have to die for Palestine. These are the changes that need to be made.
All right, I've been talking to Dr. Gershon Baskin, who's Middle East Director, International Communities Organization and former hostage negotiator. Doctor, as always, thank you very much for talking to WION World as One today.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.